It is not Wednesday, my dudes, which means it's, I guess, Thirsty Thursday. Is that what the kids call it nowadays? Regardless, we're here for another Epic 7 First Thoughts and Initial Impressions video. This one will be on Kane, the newest Giga Chad that was just shown this morning over on YouTube. As with all of these First Thoughts and Initial Impressions videos, you can expect my 2 cents on the character. Do I think they're good? Where I'd play them? What sets? What artifacts? All that stuff you've come to expect from me. If you were looking for my impressions on Abyssal Euphine, the newest Moonlight 5-star, I will link that video down in this video's description. I've decided to split both characters into their own separate video in order to condense the runtime because I spend about 15 minutes per character, and I realize that watching 30 minutes all at once is pretty difficult for some of you. So you can let me know down in the comments below if you would prefer I split them like this from now on in the future. Without wasting any more time, let's look at Kane's S3 animation.
I'm Kane. Now, I'll make you wish you never met me. The weak are nothing but prey! Did you really think you could beat me?
What an absolutely badass looking character, right? It's been a while since we've had just a generically cool, tough looking male character in Epic 7. I think they really nailed the character design, the look and feel of this character. By the way, man's got a dive kick for his S3, and if you don't know, that makes you like 400% cooler in my book. So yeah, kudos to the art team for this character, for sure. In the English dub of Epic 7, Kane is voiced by Jim Peary, who admittedly is someone I'm not super familiar with, so I decided to do some research for this video. Turns out Jim's a fairly accomplished actor. He's appeared in TV shows such as CSI Miami, as well as Friends. You could also hear him in a lot of video games, including things like God of War Ragnarok, Diablo 4, and he's actually appearing in a pretty big game that's coming out very, very soon. He appears as the classic villain of my favorite superhero, Spider-Man. That's right, he appears as Kraven the Hunter in the upcoming Spider-Man 2 for PS5 this fall. Speaking of favorite characters, Kane is a fire warrior of the Leo zodiac symbol, which means he shares a stat line with my favorite character in Epic 7, Sirmia. Taking a look at his stat line, he has 1,359 attack, 5,542 health, 105 speed, 585 defense, 23% critical hit chance, 150% critical hit damage, 3% dual attack chance, and no effectiveness or effect resistance. Imprint release for the team is 10.8% attack, and imprint concentration is 18% attack for himself. That basically translates to you don't really need dupes of this character because attack percentage is just an alright imprint to actually have. That said, Kane is supposed to be a vampire lord. In my book, vampire lords have 2,000 attack and 1,500 defense, just saying. But as far as Epic 7 goes, 1359 attack is one of the highest attack scores in the entire game. It's absolutely ludicrous. The rest of Kane's stats are kind of middling to below average, though, overall. Basically, a Leo warrior means that this man is going to bring the pain. Let's take a look at his skill set now and kind of figure out if that's what he actually does. We'll start with Kane's S2, Force Awakening. At the start of the first battle, gains 50 fighting spirit. Upon receiving lethal damage, grants immortality and vampirism for 1 turn and resets cooldown of Feast of Predation, his skill 3. Can only be activated once every 6 to 9 turns depending on Malagora. After an ally attacks, if the target is inflicted with bleed, gains 10 fighting spirit. After an ally attacks, when fighting spirit is full, consumes all fighting spirit to make the caster enraged for 2 turns. In case you forgot what enraged is, it is an undispellable buff that gives 10% attack and 10% speed. Moving on to Kane's S3, it is Feast of Predation. You acquire 50 fighting spirit upon use, as well as 3 souls. It has a 4-turn cooldown. Attacks the enemy by unleashing their power, and grants increased attack greater, aka greater attack buff, to Kane for 2 turns. Damage dealt increases proportional to the number of debuffs inflicted on the target. Soul burn for 10 souls, decrease the skill cooldown of this move by 2 turns. And finally, Kane's basic attack is Hammer Time. Attacks the enemy with a hammer and inflicts bleeding for 2 turns. When the caster is enraged, ignores effect resistance. And when it's the caster's turn, activates Rock Smash as an extra attack. Rock Smash is an extra attack that hits all enemies by slamming the ground and dispels 1 debuff from Kane. Now that we know the kit, let's talk about the character as a whole. I'm going to come out and say it right now. I don't think Kane is PvP viable. However, I think he is potentially incredibly strong for PvE. And I don't think that is a mistake. Obviously, we have a new game mode that is coming out this morning as of the recording of this video. And it primarily is asking you to have strong fire characters. Well, Kane is potentially as strong as they come. Remember, shares a stat line with Sirmia. That character is one of the best PvE characters pretty much of all time. She is basically triple S tier for Hall of Trials and is one of the best expedition characters, and she's very, very good in Abyss. I expect Kane to be very, very similar because he has a lot of things that make him potentially very good, especially for something like Hall of Trials where you're looking for follow-up attacks to increase your damage. That can be gotten from the S1 Hammer Time. We'll talk more about Hammer Time in a second, but first let's revisit the S2 Force Awakening. The Fighting Spirit that you get at the start of the first battle, that's pretty standard for a lot of Fighting Spirit characters. Upon receiving lethal damage to gain immortality for 1 turn and resetting the S3 cooldown, we already have that in Kairon, but it gets Vampirism because obviously he is a Vampire Lord. That is a thing that they decided to commit to. We already knew that this character was going to have immortality in the kit because of Veronica. When we talked about her, she has, remember, Vampire Hunter as her passive. She gets rid of immortality from vampires. I think that's a really sick thing that they've decided to commit to the fact that the vampires get hosed by the Vampire Hunter. It's a really cool design decision, and I really hope that they kind of lean into this a little bit more. Kane might not be the most impressive character, I feel like, from like a PvP or a competitive standpoint, but he has a lot of, again, PvE potential, I feel like. And I think leaning into the flavor of the characters is really, really important. It makes me feel like connected to the game. It makes me feel like the characters, like what their story is, actually matches what the character I'm playing is. So I think that's like really, really cool. And I hope to see more of that in the future. I think that right now the designers are just kind of knocking it out of the park from a flavor perspective. After an ally attacks that includes, obviously, Kane, if the target is afflicted with bleed, he gets that 10 Fighting Spirit. So that's how you stack it up. When his Fighting Spirit is full, he consumes all of it to get Enraged for 2 turns, which is obviously how we get the follow-up attack on Hammer Time. I gotta say, I feel like for filling Fighting Spirit, I don't particularly like love the bonus that you get. I think it could just be a little bit better. I think we'll take this time to talk about Hammer Time now. It's a fine S1, right? We've had this S1 before. It's basically a Runka. Like, it's a Runka's S1, but instead of having the 50% chance to get the really strong single target hit, if the target is bleeding, then you get to actually like follow up with this AoE attack, which I like the fact that it is AoE. I haven't played the new game mode, but it seems like you're only fighting one enemy, so an AoE there is kind of like a waste. I think that the only thing that makes it so that Sirmia is probably still going to have a job after Hammer Time is the fact that it's an AoE attack, so those follow-up multipliers not going to be as good as just 2 raw Sirmia S1, so yeah. But overall, like, again, I feel like Hammer Time is fine in a lot of scenarios. It could be potentially very good in a lot of PvE scenarios, though, again, just because you're comparing it to Sirmia, which is probably the closest comparison that we can actually get for how this S1 kind of functions with its follow-up attack. Also, just shout-outs to Kane being a Voltron commander, or just, you know, we know what deck this guy plays in Modern. Finally, let's just, you know, table back, talk about the S3, Feast of Predation. I think it's just an okay S3. It's the reason why I held off talking about it until the end. Like, I look at single target S3s in this game, and I usually try to compare them to, like, Spectre Tenebria for the most part, because, like, that's kind of, like, the benchmark for what makes, like, a really good single target S3. And, yeah, it gets greater attack buff, and it does deal damage proportional to the number of debuffs on the target, but, like, it doesn't have, like, the stun that has, or, like, the pushback on kill. So it depends, like, is greater attack buff worth more than those things? And then what's also the damage dealt increase based on the number of debuffs? Because, like, if it's higher than Spectre, then, like, sign me up. Great S3. Kane's kit doesn't really have a lot of utility in it. it's just a lot of damage. So if it does a lot, if the character's got great multipliers, then I think he's just going to be an absolute house in PvE content. As for how you build him, rage set. You can't convince me this character is not like a rage penetration character. Even like rage torrent, if for some reason you need the AoE on his S1 hammer time. No, this character is absolutely a rage set character. Like he wants to deal more damage to characters based on debuffs. He wants to have debuffs on the character in order to actually get started. I really like the fact that this character is like a super dedicated PvE character. Like, it's not like Brieg where I was like, this could be pretty good in PvP. No, I think I know exactly where Kane stands. Like, this is a very slow, hard-hitting, rage-set character in the same vein that you play your Red Sermias. You could go Destruction also, just max out this guy's damage, just go as big as possible, and just dunk people like your Ganondorf with his Wizard Punch from Smash Brothers. Like, it's just slow, but it does a lot of damage. It's probably really satisfying to play. Like, that's pretty much where I'm at with Kane. Just hit him hard, baby. Hit him hard. Lastly, let's talk about Kane's artifact here, Tyrant's Descent. I gotta talk about this for a second. It's called Tyrant's Descent, a notorious family treasure of the Drake family, but like, wasn't he like abandoned in the story? Didn't you say he was like orphaned? Like, so it's a family heirloom, but like, what is it? Is it the hammer? Is like, I guess the icon says it's like the hammer, but you know, it feels weird. It's like, you know, before you're like, your dad kicks the bucket, he gives you your family heirloom and goes, yeah, it's called Tyrant's Descent. You're like, wait, we're tyrants, Dad? Like, that's just like such a weird thing to have as like the backstory on the artifact. Yeah. I could just imagine that conversation. Kane just being like, Dad, what's a tyrant? And like, that just became his life's mission at that point after he was given this this family treasure. Sure. When attacking, increases damage dealt by 6 to 12% based on artifact level, with an additional 3% for each debuff inflicted on the enemy, up to a maximum of 18 to 24% based on the artifact level. It's like a Caladra for warriors. It's really good for what this character is trying to do. It being up to a maximum of 24% damage dealt, and it's not based on HP condition, means that this is like probably the artifact on this character. It's just going to hit really, really hard. You could obviously use your portraits, depending on the fight. If it's applicable, Daydream Joker is probably pretty good on the character as well. You know, the standard PvE damage amping artifacts. But it's good that, you know, warriors finally get a Caladra. I just wish it wasn't a 5-star. This really, I feel like it just feels like a 4-star artifact for the most part. But I recognize that, like, you got to have a 5-star artifact to go with the 5-star character. So that's why it is. So those are my thoughts on Kane. Let me know down in the comments below if I missed anything and what your thoughts are on Kane. If you want to see my impressions on Abyssal Euphenia, again, that video will be linked down in this one's description. As always, enjoy the rest of your day, the rest of your week, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Bye-bye now.